everyone, and welcome to Proline. It's week 3 of the NFL season. I'm John Cranton in Las Vegas, joined by world champion handicapper Jim Feist, and we have technical trends handicapper Shaun Hess joining us. Shaun is a veteran broadcaster, both TV and radio. He's an odds maker and a bettor. And Shaun, you've been on both sides of the sports betting counter and even under it a few times. Is that right?
Longer than I can count, longer than I can remember. I'm way ahead of Jim Feist, and he knows it. He just has to admit it.
Well, we're going to be looking at some of the upcoming games.
I don't know if I can comment on this. I really don't.
Come on, Jim, walking both sides of the aisle. How many guys get a chance to do that?
Well, I know a couple, actually, because they go to court and they say either you leave this state and go to Vegas or you go to jail. So they leave the state and they come to Vegas.
Well, fortunately, those days are long behind me. I'm actually boring now.
Nobody on the panel fits that description today.
Nobody.
No. We're going to be taking a look at some upcoming games this weekend, get some stats, some free plays, and some trends. But first, Jim, you're off a sizzling 7-2 NFL weekend run. The biggest blowout on the board was Seattle, 40-10. I know you had them as a big play. You had your NFL preseason total of the year. That was a Dolphins-Texans over. I know you got that around 38.5, which shows everyone the value of shopping for lines. And this weekend, you have your granddaddy of the preseason going.
Well, we do. We have our NFL preseason game of the year going this weekend. It's $99 online, but you can get it for $20 with a guarantee it'll win, or the rest of the preseason is free on me. And you can get that at 1-866-841-1655. And as you said, I'm on a 15-6 high roller baseball run, a 20-10 with the NFL preseason high rollers the last 2+ years, including the Texans and the Seahawks, as you mentioned, those games. The preseason game of the year, well, let me tell you about this a little bit. You look at all the angles, and by the way, Shaun Hess makes his living betting sports. He does it through a lot of trends and angles, which is, everybody looks at those. Other people look at other factors, but Shaun actually grinds out a profit and a living at doing something that most people, probably about 99% or at least 97% of people that bet sports lose money. And the reason they do is they just don't know what they're doing, and quite frankly, or they follow their favorite team, or they get down a little bit, or they press and they chase. And, Shaun has a lot of stories, and he has been on both sides of the aisle, and I respect the fact that he's been able to make a living at doing something that over 97% of the people cannot do. So and you talk about shopping for numbers, and I think Shaun can add to that. You must shop for numbers. You must get the best price. You don't want to go over 41 if you can go over 39. It's just that simple. So if you want to win, you should follow somebody that actually does win and does make a living doing it. I've been doing it for not as long as Shaun, but definitely over 45 years. And this week I got a preseason game of the year, and the reason I like it, I have quite a few little angles about the coaching. And in preseason, it's really about the coaching staff, not just the head coach, the offensive and defensive coordinators, who they're going to play, how long they're going to play, what their intentions are. Are they really going to attack the weaknesses of the other team, or are they just trying to play with what they've got and not really care about what the other team is doing? It's totally different than regular season stuff. So if you want to win, call this number, 1-866-841-1655. The game's going to win, or you get the rest of the preseason free on me. And you can buy it right online, if you wish, at $99. Back to you, John.
All right, we're going to start with our Twitter question of the week. This is how you can get involved. You can ask Jim or anyone on the panel a question. You just go to Twitter at Jim Feist Sports or Facebook at Proline TV. We use your question on the show. You'll be put in a drawing to win $100 of plays from any handicapper of your choice. Greg Runnels of Miami, Florida is asking, what new NFL coaches have had an impact thus far? Jim, who stands out?
Oh, well, all the coaches have an impact because they decide ahead of time how the games are going to be played. It's very important to know what coaches are doing, but we have quite a few new coaches this year, offensive, defensive coordinating coaches and head coaches. You take a guy like Andy Reid, who comes from Philadelphia, that's never really cared about preseason games at all. He's over in Kansas City, and I'm sure he still doesn't care about preseason games. He wants to know what he has on his team, because when the games count, he wants to be winning. Other guys that want to win every time, Shanahan, for example, he wants to win every preseason game. There's just these guys that have been around a long time usually have a pattern, and we look at those patterns. The difficulty starts with the new guys and the new coordinators and not knowing anything about them. You have to follow what's going on. Now, with the collective bargaining agreement and the players not being able to practice as much as the coaches would like them to practice because it's regulated by the collective bargaining agreement, people, they're not fundamentally strong anymore. Blocking and tackling is weaker than it's ever been because they're trying to protect the players. And I understand that, because the franchise of pro football is in danger now with all the head hits, and now they're switching from the head hits to the lower hits, knocking, blowing out knees. Dustin Keller the other day, gone for maybe a career. Who knows? I hope not. But there's a lot of issues in the NFL, so there's a lot of things to watch, and that's what I do all day long. So this is how we keep on top of the game. Injuries in the preseason, to me, is the biggest issue for these coaches to handle, because they're not all deep. All these teams don't have 4 or 5 guys deep at every position. They can't possibly have that. So, I mean, if you take a look at the Denver Broncos, who were the odds-on favorite to win the AFC, they've lost their center, they lost Doomerville, they lost Von Miller, they lost a cornerback. This is serious. It changes the team. And can they fill those guys? Von Miller won guys 30 sacks last year. He's not going to be there for at least 6 weeks. Injuries. And that's what's going to dictate what these coaches do, because they can't keep losing players and be as effective as they were.
Okay, Shaun, how about you with NFL coaches?
Well, let me kind of respond to one thing Jim said. You mentioned about the Denver Broncos, and the thing that bothers me is every time I see a show or even do one, there's never been a mention of the fact that Elway went out and got Peyton Manning, and maybe arguably the greatest quarterback ever. Could be. He would certainly be in that discussion. But the fact remains, and you know me, Jim, I'm a bottom line guy. I don't do the 25th letter of the alphabet very often. I want to know what happened. And they brought Peyton Manning in, and the guy before him, who they ran out of town and paid a lot less money to, got them to the playoffs and got them deeper into the playoffs. Peyton Manning got them to the playoffs, and they lost that first game at home as an 8.5-point favorite. Let me talk about one other thing. You talk about coaching situations, Jim, and this is very unusual. This thing in New Orleans with Sean Payton, I think this is the first time this has happened. He was out a year because of Bounty Gate. This team has had 2 preseason games. They're 2-0 straight up and against the bookie, but both of those games are at home. And I don't think either one of us is so old that we don't remember what they do on the road, because this year they are on the road. We're going to talk about that game a little later on. But you remember when they were a 10-point road favorite in the playoffs to a team that won only 7 games and lost that game straight up by 5 points. Interesting to see what's going to happen with Sean Payton. This team playing with a lot of energy, but that game was at home.
Well, Shaun, I know that Tim Tebow's numbers, Tim Tebow won when he was in Denver, but boy, his overall numbers were pretty bad. So if you're a GM and you bring him back and the team goes 6-10, then what do you do?
Yeah, but if you spend $98 million for a quarterback who's supposed to get you to the Super Bowl and he doesn't do as well as the guy who ran out of town, I think you have to answer for that, and Elway hasn't had to do that yet.
Saying the heat is on both those guys in Denver this season.
I think with Peyton, it's absolutely on Peyton. That's a strange thing. It's not on the coach. It's on Peyton Manning. It's on him.
Okay, let's take a look at some NFL Week 2 preseason betting observations. Jim, what are some of the things that stood out other than dollar signs after that 7-2 run for you?
Well, I think I touched on some of it when I talked about the injury issues. And I think, to me, that's the biggest issue in the preseason. These quality players that are going down, they're not easily replaced. There are a lot of teams, there's a lot of players filling these positions, but when you start losing top quality players, you're going to change the team. And you can go from an 11-win team down to a 6-win team very easily by losing a big offensive line player or a quarterback. It's a major problem, and that's what I'm seeing in the preseason. I think the NFL really has to get down to handling how they're going to, the rule changes they're making, and it's potentially a disaster for the league and the sport. As far as this year is concerned, I think you'd have to be surprised a little bit as how good the Patriots are playing without the Gronkowski and without Welker and without Hernandez. And Brady looks like a machine. And he goes out there and it's nothing. They just go down the field and score down the field. It's like vintage Belichick Brady, even without those players. It's amazing how the Patriot way is still working. A lot of people talk about how good Kansas City is going to be this year, and it very well could be. Andy Reid, Alex Smith, definitely an upgrade from what they had, but so far in the preseason, they have not looked particularly good. We expect the Raiders to be bad. Of course, we expect Jacksonville to be bad, and I don't think they're going to surprise anybody. I think they're going to be very bad. Cleveland, with the new head coach and the new offensive coordinator, I have high hopes for North Turner, who I do not like as a head coach, but I do like as an offensive coordinator, and Whedon. I think Whedon is going to be a very, very productive quarterback, providing he has a game plan that he can work with that fits his skill level. And North Turner is brilliant, a brilliant guy with quarterbacks and as an offensive coordinator. I think they'll do very well.
Shaun, how about you for week 2?
Let's take a look. Excuse me. I can hardly talk here. One thing about preseason that I look for, especially in week 3, which is known as dress rehearsal week, because you're looking for starters to play longer. Week 4 is probably going to be pretty much a no-show thing for most of these coaches. They just want to stay healthy. But take a look at the Oakland Raiders, a team that was really on top for years. This is a team, you want to see them improve from week to week. That has not been the case. I mean, the starters trailed Dallas 10-3 early, and then they were down 10-6 at the half before finally winning late. The offense has 325 yards, 2 turnovers, quarterbacks. How about 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 4 penalties for 35 yards? Talk about room for improvement across the board. Then in week 2, they get out yarded 369 to 185, another turnover, 7 sacks, 12 penalties for 127 yards. For a long time under Al Davis, who should have gave it up longer than he did, but for a long time under Al Davis, they actually thrived on that kind of stuff. They led the league every year in penalties, but they kept winning. The Darryl LaMonica, Ken Stabler days are over. The Raiders fell behind 23-0 to the Saints. In this league, you just can't dig your way out of that hole. Offensive and defensive line struggled. Quarterback in 2 preseason games. How about 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, career backup Matt Flynn, Tyrell Pryor. These guys I don't know if they can get enough time. And then we're talking about going again without 3/4 of their starting defensive line, and Lamar Houston and those tackles, Sims and Vance Walker, out with injuries. And as a matter of fact, Jim, a lot of these teams have a whole lot of injuries already for preseason, already to start out. This team won 4 games last year. The line on their total wins posted by the house, and I always look at these numbers, is 5.5. And the question is, if you take the over, where are you going to get those extra 2 wins?
They might go less than 4 wins the way they're playing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Ken Stabler days are over, and the Jamarcus Russell days are here. Oh, I forgot he's gone too.
Oh, very good point. Very good point.
I want to take a look at some assistant coaches actually can be under the radar. Let's take a look at the Arizona Cardinals. They have a new offensive coordinator in Harold Goodwin. Now, this guy's background is as an offensive line coach with the Steelers. They like to run the football. He used to play for Michigan in college under Bo Schembechler. You guys remember him. He was all about the power running game. And even his younger brother, Jonathan Goodwin, is the starting center for the San Francisco 49ers, another run-oriented team. And what we're seeing with the Cardinals is they're trying to run the football more. In the opener against Green Bay, they ran for 92 yards, just 2.6 yards per carry, so that shows you how many weaknesses. That is still a trouble spot for them. But then last week against Dallas, they ran for 105 yards. And if you like to play totals, if you're looking at unders, you like teams like this that like to play tough defense and run the football. They chews up yards and the clock. And what have we seen with Arizona thus far? 17-0 win in the opener, a 12-7 win over Dallas, 2 games away under the total. I could see that as a trend continuing both in preseason and the regular season with this new run-oriented Arizona offense. Okay, let's get to our first game, guys. It's going to be in the Meadowlands. The Jets are playing the Giants. Giants are a 2.5-point favorites, a home game for both teams. 39.5 the total. The game is on Saturday. As Shaun mentioned, the starters are expected to play deep into the game. Shaun, we'll start with you. You've got a bigger mouth than Rex Ryan. How come you're not coaching the Jets?
John, you cannot hurt me with that. Listen, I'm a supporter, believe it or not, for Greg McElroy at quarterback. They're not going to give him a shot. But they will not let this kid play. Week 1, he was 11 of 19 for a touchdown, no interceptions. The few times that he's ever played, he's always played well. He has a 4-year contract for $450,000. I mean, that's cheap. That's cheap. They're going to start Gino. Gino's probably going to start. I don't know. I never did understand what Ryan ever saw in Mark Sanchez. He was pretty much a one-year wonder at Southern California, and now there's no doubt about it. The only weak spot that the Jets have for those 2 years that they went to the championship game in the AFC was at the quarterback position, and they just don't seem to want to give up. I personally think they ought to give McElroy a shot. They have no reason not to do it. He won't even play. Let's take a look at the Giants. Giants have the better quarterback rotation for this. One other thing, and Jim, this is something I've used over the years, as you probably might remember. Since this is a dress rehearsal week, where these coaches are actually going to look at their starters to find out where they are, I like to go to the total wins that are posted, and the total wins for the Giants are at 9. The total wins for the Jets are at 6.5. That's a 2.5 game difference in a 16-game schedule. And the line is only 2.5. And this team, the Giants, beat these Jets pretty good last year. I think the price is cheap. I think the way to go is to lay the 2.5 with the Giants.
Well, I couldn't argue with you, Shaun, and another point, you made an excellent point on over and under wins. You would have to say the Giants have a 9 at season win total, and they play in a tougher division and a tougher conference than the Jets, and their total is 6.5. I don't know where the Jets are going to get their wins from. Maybe they can beat Buffalo a couple times. I think Kevin Kolb is done. So I think that if they don't get this other kid back who has a lot of potential, I believe has a lot of potential, maybe a couple wins there. I don't really think so. I think the Jets are going to win less than 6.5, less than 7 games, and I'd be betting under in that spot. As far as this game is concerned, Coughlin likes to win these games. However, the last couple years, it hasn't worked out that way. I think what you need to look at is the Jets are just so far inferior to the Giants this year, and Rex Ryan's on the hot seat. So the problem is, who's going to want to win the game? Which coach is going to put most emphasis on that? And Rex Ryan is definitely on the hot seat, and this is a battle for New York, so to speak. So it's kind of a dangerous game for me to pick a side only because of that. I know who the better team is, and if there's a regular season game on a neutral floor, you'd be looking at the Giants maybe close to, 8, maybe 7.5, 8 in the game. But what I like in the game is the under. I don't think you're going to get a lot of offense. I think it's going to be conservative game plan, and the defenses will, at least the one thing Jets can do is they can play a little defense, and I think you'll see an under bet.
Well, Jim, you mentioned you wondered where the Jets wins are going to come from this season. I'm wondering where they're going to get any points in preseason and regular season. They have a new offensive coordinator in Marty Morningwig. This guy has brought in the West Coast attack. It's a short, safe passing game, so you're not talking about an explosive run-and-gun type offense. He was brought in for one reason, and that's to cut down turnovers, which has killed this team the last 2 years. And that's another way of saying Mark Sanchez. So it's not going to be a wide-open offense scoring a lot of points, despite the fact that they're 2-0 over the total thus far in preseason. It's a little misleading. I watched that game against Jacksonville last week. They were down 13-10 at the half. Boy, that offense was just stuck in first gear. Most of that first half was really embarrassing. I don't see any improvement. And then you got the Giants. They've scored 18 and 12 points in these 2 preseason games, 2-0 under the total. Victor Cruz, their most important player other than Eli Manning, he's in a walking boot, is not going to play this week. And the offense without him in preseason has struggled. The Jets in week 3 of preseason are on an 8-1 run under the total. I don't see that changing. Okay, let's take a look at our last game. We got the Saints playing Texans, the Sunday game. The number went from 2.5 to 3 on the home team. Houston, total of 44. Nice clash of styles here. You got the Saints with the high-flying offense, Houston with the physical running game and the bone-crushing defense. Jim, who has the edge?
Well, I think, Shaun brought up earlier that perhaps New Orleans has a chip on the shoulder after what happened with Bounty Gate, and Sean Payton is back, and they haven't been that outstanding so far in the two games. This is a road game. Houston has got a solid running game, solid coaching staff. During the season, I like the Saints to do a lot of damage this year. I think they're going to be very potent. In this particular game, I look for points. I'm going to go with the total here. I think the way the Saints are playing, the way Houston is playing, and Houston's got a pretty good quarterback rotation with Case Keenum, the second guy, Yates?
TJ Yates.
Yep.
Yates, and of course Shaun starting the game. That's a pretty good quarterback rotation, and when they get up against some backup players on the other side, I think they can put up quite a few points. The Saints they have McCown and Ryan Griffin and Seneca Wallace. I don't put as much stock in that. So I think what you're going to see here is quite a few points in the game. I'm betting the game over.
Shaun?
Earlier, I admit, we talked a little bit about New Orleans with the coach coming back. No secret about that. Let's take a look at Houston. First of all, Houston, if you look at their record, they've been improving steadily every year. They won 11 games in 2011. They won 13 in 2012. They won a playoff game. They're on the march. Houston starters will likely play at least the first half. Big concern here. Running back Arian Foster. Coach Gary Kubiak, right, in his 8th season. I mean, he's been around for a while. This guy's been to 6 Super Bowls, so he knows what it's like to be at the big show. Trick is now for him to get there as a coach and to win it. But in my opinion, Foster has to be healthy in order for them to even have a shot at winning the Super Bowl, let alone getting there. You look at the number 2 guy, Ben Tate. He's also an excellent running back, but he's also injury prone. Last year, he rushed for 65 times he carried the ball. And this is not good because he's always hurt, just like Foster is. But Foster at least can produce. If I had to pick a side in this game, I'd actually lean toward the favorite on the home side. One thing that's known, that Saints are known for, they don't play nearly as well at the house as they do on the road, and I think Mr. Kubiak is going to make a statement. This is the dress rehearsal time. I think his team will step up, and I really see this as a pretty comfortable margin. You mentioned one other thing about the Saints, their defensive coordinator, Mr. Ryan. I never thought much of him in Dallas, and I kind of think he's living off his brother's name when he had a name, and I don't know that really anybody can do a whole lot with that defense without maybe a year or two of getting some healthy players and a better system than they had last year. I'm going to lean toward Houston in this game and lay the 3.
Well, I like the motivation that Shaun mentioned with the Saints this preseason. They've looked very good. But also keep in mind Gary Kubiak of the Texans, preseason record of 18-12, straight up 18-10-2 against the spread. So as a result, I'm going to take a look at the total. You got the Saints with their offensive philosophy is all about aggressive, up-tempo attacking. Breeze and Peyton are reunited for this season. This will be the week when the starters are going to be playing into the third quarter. Remember the Saints a year ago, number 1 NFL in passing. And what have we seen in preseason? They rolled up 427 yards in the opener against Kansas City. And then last week, a 28-20 win over the total against Oakland. They had 369 yards. Meanwhile, the Texans have scored 27 and 24 points in preseason. I like the quarterback rotation with Shaun and Yates. Plus, the game is indoors, so I'm looking at this one to be a high-scoring game. All right, guys, let's get to our best bets segment. Shaun, we'll start with you. What do you like this week?
Okay, I mentioned before that I only do this during week 3 because of the dress rehearsal thing where these coaches, I think, are focused on finding out where their teams are on both sides of the football. Team wins for the Atlanta Falcons in a very tough division, 10. Team wins for the Tennessee Titans in a not too tough division, 6.5. That's a 3.5. That's 3.5 game difference. And we're getting 3 points. Based on that alone, I'm going to take a shot with the Atlanta Falcons plus the 3. I think they're clearly the better team. And this is the game where these coaches do try and find out where they are. And there's just no question about can you imagine what the point spread in this game would be if it was a regular season like week 5 or 6? No question. So the value here, if there's such a thing as an overlay, and Jim certainly knows the meaning of that term, there's an overlay. I think it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm sorry. What did I say? The Atlanta Falcons. Make it the Atlanta Falcons plus the 3.
That's a dog.
Well, I can't disagree with that. That's an excellent choice. When you look at it the way you're looking at it, I mean, I'm looking at numbers here. 3, and some of the places have 3 minus 20, so you're laying the juice on the favorite. And that's basically they're betting against Mike Smith, the coach, and thinking that he's not going to show up. But this is 1 week. He very well might, and the dress rehearsal week, even for coaches that don't give a darn about preseason games, they sometimes will show up here. And Tennessee is not much of an offensive juggernaut, so I see your point there. As far as I'm concerned, the total that I mentioned before on Houston and New Orleans, I really like this game to go over. I'm looking currently at a line, if I can find the darn thing on my screen. The current line is, this is a Sunday game. It opened 44, it got bet down to 43.5 at present. I think that's incorrect. The game should be going up. That's my best bet right here on the show. New Orleans Saints, Houston Texans over the total.
Okay, I'll take a look at the Browns-Colts game. You got Norm Turner back with the Cleveland Browns now. He's not a conservative coach, aggressive up-tempo attack. And then you got the Indianapolis Colts. They have a new offense coordinator, and Pep Hamilton. He's bringing in also an attacking offense. These teams are combined 3-1 over the total in preseason, and the game is indoors. So I look for the Browns-Colts over the total. All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. We're going to see you back again next Thursday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, for another edition of ProLine, direct from Las Vegas. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you, guys.